Hi, this is Tamsen Granger.
This is Dan Abuhoff.
With Tamsen and Dan read the newspaper. On July 7th, 2019, a really hot, humid July 4th weekend. Wouldn't you say, Dan?
It's air conditioned here, and it's very pleasant. I'm fine. But yeah, outside it's been hot and humid.
It's been a little oppressive.
It's July
in New Jersey.
It's July 4th. It's supposed to be hot. It doesn't throw me.
All right. So, by the way, we have a fun announcement. There's a new baby in the Granger clan, and on July 4th.
Yeah, that's something.
Brian and Jen Granger, down in Charleston, welcomed new baby Oscar Granger. Mm-hmm. And so welcome, Oscar. This is very exciting.
Another listener.
This is Vivian Granger's first great-grandchild.
Oh, wow. How do you like that?
Isn't that exciting? My mother's first great-grandchild.
I hadn't thought about it that way.
And Oscar, what a great name.
It is a good name.
Whether you're thinking about hot dogs or great musicals,
that's
Oscar Hammerstein or Oscar Levant, one of my favorites. He was kind of a nut. But all right, well, moving right along. We wish the new family some very good times.
Yes. Well, July 4th every year. Birthday. Way to go.
Right.
All right. So here we go. Jam-packed weekend. Sort of. We went to the movies last night. We saw Late Night.
Finally, we saw Late Night.
Yes, it's been out for a few weeks.
I thought we'd be the only people in the theater.
But we weren't. It was very crowded. It was jammed. It was air-conditioned. It was very pleasant.
Yes. It was all people of our demographic.
Yes.
And as I said to you, I think growing up with not a huge amount of air conditioning, that was a normal thing to do in the summer, was to go to the movies. Because then you would definitely be in air conditioning.
Well, the great thing about it, too, was
2 hours or whatever.
We went to dinner afterwards, and it was pouring rain, and the restaurant was literally across the street from the movie theater. So that's the way to do it.
I'm heavily embedded in this nostalgia aspect.
Oh, really?
And you just zoomed right back to present day. But anyway, what did you think of the movie?
I liked it. So that's the movie with Emma Thompson and Mindy Kaling. And the story is that Emma Thompson is playing a talk show host, a veteran talk show host, who's been doing her show for 20, 25, maybe 30 years, and perhaps has grown a little stale in that job, and certainly has been passed by social media and what we'll call modern humor. But she's hanging on, and then the question is how she can reconnect with her audience and maybe even broaden her audience so that she can reignite her popularity. And the person who helps her and fits and starts is Mindy Kaling as one of her new writers, right?
Right.
But I thought it was extremely good. For some reason, I went to the movie with the impression that it hadn't gotten very good reviews. But when I looked at Rotten Tomatoes today, I saw that the ratings were 75 to 80, which is pretty good to me. So I think a lot of people like it.
It's not super good.
Yeah. But what do you think of the movie?
I enjoyed it a lot. Yeah. It addresses a lot of different ideas of getting older, when to give up your job, when to fight for it,
right?
And confronting the realities of modern life. To be honest, the Emma Thompson character is not passed by social media. She refuses to engage at all.
Right.
And also she's oblivious to the idea that she's no longer relevant or all that popular. She's just zooming along.
But at the same time, you kind of admire that to some degree. She's not going to be carried away by trends. She's not going to change who she is in order to become popular with a different demographic. She is who she is. And she has a great deal of belief, and that's the way she ought to be. She feels she's doing things the right way. She thinks she's putting forward sophisticated humor as opposed to superficial kind of childish humor, which she associates with a lot of folks of the demographic that she's supposed to appeal to. So she's in a little bit of a quandary. How does she maintain her standards on the one hand, even as she seeks to broaden her audience?
Well, I mean, but she's got to do that.
Right.
I mean, she only exists if she has an audience.
That's the quandary,
There's
right?
no, it's not like she's saving the world and the audience be damned. The audience is the world she's trying to connect with. She's just got to find a different way to connect.
Right.
And Mindy, who comes out of nowhere, who comes out of a chemical plant in Pennsylvania, is going to be the person to show her that.
Because Mindy has the experience of making humorous announcements at the chemical plant. They even show her that's her background in comedy.
And so, it addresses discrimination against women, against, other peoples, other races, etc., in the television workplace.
Right.
And so, I thought it was good. I thought it was fun and funny. The ending is a little bit of a disappointment.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a disappointment. It's a little too pat, but I looked at the review that was in the Times, and it's by A.O. Scott. It is largely incomprehensible, but he does make an observation at the end, if you stay with it, which I think rang true for me, which is one of the things that saves the movie and makes it worth seeing, is that Emma Thompson's character is interesting. She's an interesting person. Emma Thompson makes her interesting. And he says it's a great performance by Emma Thompson. I think that's true.
Yes, Emma Thompson was terrific. Yeah. Absolutely terrific. But here's my beef with it.
What?
At the end, okay, spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Okay, so she survives. She survives by, to some extent, embracing the current ways of doing things a little bit, and also, kind of lending herself. She's been kind of this imperious boss, isolating herself, and so she actually begins to learn the names of her writers, etc., but begins also to have a little more faith in her own material, in her ideas, and the idea that the audience truly wants to connect with her.
Right.
So not just her caricature.
What's your beef? You said you started out with here's my beef.
At the end, all right, she plays this fabulous character who looks terrific.
Right.
Great hairdos, great outfits. Not outlandish, but to some extent, kind of quirky, adorable. Fantastic clothes. She doesn't look childish. She doesn't look like an older woman, trying to play a young femme fatale. It's all perfect. But once they change her into the new Catherine, whatever her name is, and she's serious and thoughtful and, truthful.
Right.
She stops dyeing her hair. She's not wearing false eyelashes anymore. Her clothing becomes on the verge of being dowdy.
Really? I didn't notice that.
There is a huge change.
Oh.
As if to say, striking, fashionable women cannot be smart and interesting.
I didn't catch that.
And that kind of pisses me off.
I didn't catch that at all.
So
I'm sure you're right.
I just thought that was that's another cliche. We like to fall for it, like, sure, I could be beautiful too, but I'm too busy being smart.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, the ending was a real compromise in a lot of ways, but just the last few minutes of the movie. So we recommend that.
Yeah, you can go. Well, I wouldn't go to it. You don't have to go to it. Well, but you can definitely.
I would go
to it. No, but I think it's a perfectly good movie to see on the small screen.
Oh, sure, too.
When it comes around to that.
Too.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
there's not much else to see out there. I think it's an easy recommendation.
If you're desperate,
yeah.
But it's barely showing at this point. I think it's been out for a while.
All right, so you had more to go.
Ice cream.
Yes, ice cream.
Okay,
July 4th.
July 4th. So to cool off, you might want to eat some ice cream. So the New York Times, of course, had an ice cream article this week called "America Scoop by Frosty Scoop." So this interested me because, of course, as I've said many times on this podcast, I do make ice cream. We haven't bought commercial ice cream except in true emergencies for a long time. And so we eat homemade ice cream, and so I'm naturally pretty interested in ice cream. What's great about this is they have examples of fantastic shops, fascinating flavors all over the country. So this is a little bit too cool for school for me.
Yeah, but guys, what do they have?
You know, I'll never get to most of these places, and I won't get any place where they have ice cream this interesting. And it's not like I'm really dying to have the strangest ice cream ever. But some of these sound fabulous. Persian ice cream in L.A. Well, L.A., of course, you know, why wouldn't L.A. have Persian ice cream at a place called Saffron and Rose? So you want to go there and get ice cream with rosewater syrup and so forth. Or maybe you want coconut ice cream at Crank and Boom in Lexington, Kentucky. A young woman who grew up in her family's Thai restaurant started making ice cream. In Texas, Richardson, Texas, there is ice cream from Syria at Big Dash. And this comes from that kind of ice cream that's kind of chewy, and they call it Booza. Booza. There's also, it's similar to the Turkish ice cream that we keep reading about, dondurma. It has mastic in it. Mastic is like gum. Yeah. And makes ice cream kind of chewy. So my ice cream is usually not chewy, so I'm interested in that concept. And then, you know, Peruvian ice cream in East Stroudsburg, in the Poconos, in PA, at Llama Ice Cream. So it was a fun article to read about all these different super crazy flavors, including a Mexican flavor called the Twinkie, which has pieces of a Twinkie kind of dessert popular in Mexico, and wonderful discussion of Cuban flavors in Miami. And the owner of this restaurant, her name is Susie Batche, says she's had elderly Cuban men in tears tasting her ice cream.
What's is it the name of the flavor or not?
The name of the flavor is wonderful. It's Abuela Maria.
Oh, okay.
So it has pieces of broken up Maria cookies in it, and this is at Iacocca.
Yeah, all right. So this is
sugar, right?
All right. So let's
in Miami.
In terms of your ice cream, just so we can get a little more concrete here in terms of flavors. I mean, what we were talking before. It's hard for me to sort of catalog all the ice creams you've made, but you make ice cream out of kefir and out of buttermilk. Those are two different bases. So you might have a chocolate ice cream or a vanilla ice cream out of kefir or out of buttermilk. You might add something like stracciatella. You might get a little...
Which would be melted chocolate.
Exactly.
Which hardens in it.
You have brandy...
But I just make that because kefir and buttermilk are supposed to be good for you, right?
Yes.
So it's ice cream that will cure everything.
Right. So there's prune ice cream. Brandy-soaked prune with sliced pecans.
Spiced pecans.
Spiced pecans. There's gin-soaked raisin ice cream.
Yeah, the gin-soaked raisin ice cream, that's for your arthritis.
Yeah, well, no, I don't have arthritis. But
gin-soaked golden raisins. It's important. It has to be golden raisins.
Otherwise, they're too hard.
There's some magical thing that happens. Apparently, you can get the same effect by having a gin and tonic.
Right. I bet you can.
All right.
Peanut butter chocolate, tin roof sundae. This is normal ice cream. Rum raisin, molasses ginger snap. Here we go. Green tea. You make green tea ice cream, which is
I call
unexpected.
It matcha ice cream, of course.
Miso ice cream.
Which is your favorite, isn't it?
Yes, I do like miso ice cream. There's blueberry chocolate, which was just recent. And, of course, I do like your turmeric ice cream.
Okay. But the blueberry chocolate ice cream was weird.
Yes.
Because...
but not the turmeric.
Because it was purple.
Yeah.
But because I had put chocolate in it, it tasted like chocolate.
It was blue ice cream.
There was a real disconnect.
It was blue chocolate ice cream. But the turmeric looks exactly like turmeric. There's no confusion there.
And again, cures everything.
Yeah. All right. So that's enough ice cream variety for me. I don't think I have to go any place to have Persian ice cream. Lee Iacocca died this week. So Lee Iacocca was a big deal that those of us of a certain age remember. Was a huge figure in business, was a huge figure in Washington. It was rumored that he might run for president. He ran Chrysler at a time that Chrysler was about to go under. at a time that the country didn't like to have big companies like Chrysler go under.
So he saved Chrysler, right?
The government saved Chrysler. There was a loan guarantee.
Didn't he talk the government into that?
He did.
Something?
He talked them into.
He seemed like a big hero at the time.
He did. That's a little part of his story, but I think it's true. 1979 was a loan guarantee, but it was more impressive than the loan that he worked out from the government. Was 3 years later, Chrysler paid it back. So it worked out extremely well
for everyone.
But here's how they did it. Okay? Yeah, I'm going to
The rest of the story.
The rest of the story. I'm oversimplifying, but here, this is a big part of it, and this is part of our personal experience. What he realized just about that time was that the American consumer continued to want big station wagons. But if you recall the fuel crisis of the 1970s, there were pretty stringent fuel economy regulations imposed on cars that made it impossible to make and to sell those station wagons. So what he did was they came up with the minivan, and here's the trick. They persuaded the government the minivan should be regulated as a light truck.
So it had less stringent.
There are very few regulations on light trucks in terms of emission standards and in terms of fuel economy regulations. And this was a big debate because the minivan looked like a utility van. And when they came up with the minivan, they said, look, we have some utility vans in the same model, but only 3% of their sales really were those utility vans. And anyway, he won the argument. Mm-hmm. They called it a light truck like utility van, and they sold like crazy. We bought a minivan, and more than one minivan.
My father ran right out. My father was delighted.
It was a great car.
He said, he pointed out immediately, it has a wheelbase of a much smaller car.
Right.
So it's much more manageable. Tamsen, you need one.
Right.
And he sold me his.
Right. So that was a huge thing in bringing the company back, but it all had to do with government regulation. So that had as much to do with their success as getting the loan guarantee, was getting that regulation of the minivans, and they were the huge leader in minivans, and they took over. So it's funny, the light truck thing has always continued. It's still that way, sort of. Light trucks are regulated differently, and light truck sales are huge. Mm-hmm. So it turns out there's a new company that's...
But wait a minute, let me just say one more Iacocca thing.
Yeah, sure.
When I think of him, I think, wasn't he the head of the helping to raise money to renovate Ellis Island?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
yes.
And when we actually went to a big opening there
we did.
when it first opened, which was spectacular. What a fascinating place, what a great effort. And that's what I always think of.
Well, he made a speech. He said, look, if it wasn't if my parents, if my forebears weren't accepted at Ellis Island, I wouldn't have come over. I wouldn't have been here. I couldn't have saved those jobs. And it's true of a lot of other immigrants and immigrant families. Yeah. So he was a big supporter of Ellis Island.
And of course, on both sides of our families, many people came through Ellis Island. So that was very much fun to see.
Well, my grandparents, yeah. Absolutely. So in any event... But there's a similar drama being played out now. There's a fellow whose name is R.J. Scaringe, and he has a company called Rivian. And Rivian is an electric car manufacturer. Now, I say an electric car manufacturer as if these things, emerge every few weeks, but they don't. It is very hard, almost impossible, to create a new car company. Tesla being the exception that proves the rule, and Tesla may not succeed. There are very few new car companies.
Every few years, there's another movie about back in the day, somebody trying to start.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And this doesn't work. So, and yet this guy, straight out of MIT, his doctorate program, came out with the idea. He is determined to start an electric car company. He spends the first few years coming up with a prototype, which is a sports car. And then after he develops the sports car, after 2 years, he ditches the plan because, quote, in my heart and soul, I knew I wasn't answering the fundamental question of why the world needs this company to be successful. And he says, we're doing something else, which is insane. And he pivots to make, guess what? Electric light trucks. Okay. That's what he's going to do. Electric light trucks. But are they real trucks in terms of, the kind of thing that does the dirty work that you see on television? No, they're not. They are lifestyle products, capable but meant for recreational use. And they start at $70,000, and reasonably equipped are going to be $90,000.
So they're going to be like the pickup trucks, like the guys who zoom by us when we're out for our bike rides?
Right, the guys who would never put dirt in a truck. They're going to be like that kind of thing, recreational light vehicles.
I mean, it's not like there haven't been electric trucks before.
Yeah.
Actually, years ago, I was at the Museum of the City of New York, and they had some kind of display.
Yeah.
And there was some kind of little delivery trucks shown that were battery operated in the early part of the 20th century. And it turns out that that goes back to a company called Walker Electric. Mm-hmm. And they produced delivery trucks. Uh-huh. From like 1907 to like the 1940s. And those replaced the old horse and buggy guys.
Oh, really?
And they were vastly preferable because they didn't poop all over your streets.
Yes.
And they were, much nicer to have around. So bakeries had them, dairy guys had them, milk guys, and various kinds of businesses. They had a 50-mile range, and they could, they had like 3.5 horsepower. Right. So,
well, these are real.
So that's funny.
These are real trucks, so they're going to have a range of a few hundred miles. Let's see, Amazon has invested $700 million in his company. Oh, it's 400-mile range. Ford itself has invested $500 million in his company. Mm-hmm. And we'll see. But so does that even work? Does the idea, it's sort of the Iacocca story backwards, if you think about it, right? So he is now investing in, Iacocca succeeds because he convinces people
that they need a truck.
That they need a truck or a minivan, right. But the key is it's not going to be regulated. He doesn't have to worry about emissions. This guy is in the same category, but the key about his whole product is it's energy efficient, it's eco-useful, it has no emissions. It's the reverse of what Iacocca is doing. Right. The only way this succeeds, in my mind, is if he is expecting, and Amazon's expecting, and Ford's expecting, that those regulations on light trucks are going to change. Right. And they're going to start enforcing emission standards on them, and they're going to have the only truck.
They're going to be ready.
And they're going to have the truck.
And they're going to have the...
That's my prediction.
All right.
There you go. Invest. Rivian. Okay. Go ahead.
All right. Just a note of caution there.
Yeah.
I think it is a great idea, but when you encourage people that way, very often you're not exactly correct.
Yes. You're talking about horse racing. That's very different.
All right. Just putting that out there.
Yeah, all right.
Although, of course, I believe in you.
Yes.
Article about celery. Yeah. Now, I believe in celery.
Yeah.
I really do believe in celery. And, celery has massive benefits, allegedly. I mean, it's good for everything. It's good for your digestion.
Yeah, you make celery soup.
It's anti-inflammation. Right. And whenever we have the celery soup, we feel tremendously better.
But there's no celery ice cream, I noticed.
I mean, there could be celery ice cream, but, what the heck, I'm not sure.
Celery soup is close enough.
Yeah, let's stick to the gin-soaked raisin ice cream, will you please?
Yeah.
That's already curing everything. But anyway, so now everybody feels this way, including especially Anthony William, a sort of, health food guru who recommended in a book called The Medical Medium Celery Juice, the most powerful medicine of our time, healing millions worldwide. And so now there's a shortage of celery.
Really?
Everybody wants it in their juice, their smoothie, whatever. This has compounded with, there was a couple of bad crops, some soil borne disease. So there's a little bit of shortage and a huge demand. A natural food store and juice bar in Brooklyn Heights, Perylandra, sold about 700 pounds of celery in May 2018, 1,200 pounds of it in May 2019.
Do you have trouble buying celery?
Do I? You know what? Actually, recently I have noticed.
Oh, really?
That I was, I was about to buy some celery. There wasn't much of a selection. There wasn't much there. And it seemed like a shockingly high price. I think of celery as not costing much at all.
Yeah.
And it was higher than I thought. Now, they said this happens. 5 years ago, it was organic almonds. 7 years ago, it was kale. All right.
Okay.
5 years ago, a couple years ago, it was cilantro. So the trick is, what you really need to figure out is what will be all the rage next. And our food guru, Anthony William, is kind of betting on papaya, which he says heals acne, eczema, and psoriasis.
Isn't papaya highly caloric? Yes, is the answer.
I mean, a lot of fruits are. It's not just a matter of highly caloric. It's high glycemic. They have a lot of sugar, and it's sugar that metabolizes. But if you have the fiber, etc., you're okay. But okay, so there we have it: electric trucks and papaya.
All right.
All right.
I know where I'm going.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Anyway, but here's what I would really invest in. This is actually what I would really invest in, and it is non-profit. Non-profit groups bring books to where children get bored. And it's a fun little article in the New York Times this week about books for children in a variety of places, including barbershops. Okay? Now, barbershops have always been an important place to read, okay? But it is my understanding that it's a place where it's... maybe you want to fill in...
There are men's magazines.
Men's magazines. Where men are honing their reading skills.
Right, reading
on the articles. Isn't it always the articles?
The kind of articles that a man can appreciate while he's getting his haircut. That's right.
But here, they probably still have those in the barbershops, but they also have a different kind of picture book. And that would be picture books for young children. I mean, there are literally organizations that are, this one gentleman, what's his name? Dante Williams, Dante Williams supplies his barbershop with books from Barbershop Books, which was founded by Alvin Irby in, I think, Harlem. In 2014, he was noticing that kids were getting antsy, waiting for their turn, and wished he had a book to hand to the kids. So in various places, the books have become an important part of that barbershop community. We hear so much about kids be entertained by the books, and they are engaged and they are encouraged to read aloud to the barber.
Right, that's the key. They have the big stacks of books there that people donate, but what they do is they have the kids read while they're getting their haircut, and they even say that sometimes the barbers understand that they should say they don't hear very well. Can you read a little louder? And the kids really do project. And
that was encouraged by a barber, Jonathan Escueda, who noticed that on the team, I think it was a basketball team he was helping to coach, kids very often had a difficult time communicating.
Yeah.
And again, this was a way of engaging, communicating, giving kids confidence to speak louder and confidence in their reading. There's also a group called Libraries Without Borders that is part of the Laundry Literacy Coalition. And these people are, you can imagine kids in laundromats, right? Yeah. What do they do all the time while they're with their parents waiting for the laundry to get done? They run around and raise heck. So, some of these places now, books are available to keep them occupied and perhaps be a good thing. So I was quite charmed by that. I hope there will be more than...
Well, they had that cute story at the end of it, but they said that, that this one little kid was kind of hesitant, and then he got into this, and he ended up practicing on a book all week, waiting for his next haircut. He was very proud that he was going to read it aloud to the barber, which he did.
Right.
And now he's doing very well in school.
Yeah, very cute article.
Yeah, right.
Fun idea.
So there's an article about John Sterling, who's the play-by-play announcer on the radio for the Yankees. Now, John Sterling, I'm a Met fan. I'm not a Yankee fan. So I don't listen to John Sterling too much. And John Sterling has his detractors and his supporters. He doesn't catch everything that goes on the field, but there's a reason for it. John Sterling's 81 years old, and he's doing the games. He doesn't even see that well. So there's always a little bit of a joke. Someone said, "Did you hear the Yankee game last night?" He said, "There's a long fly ball. It's going, and the shortstop catches it." That kind of thing happens all the time. So there's sort of a little bit of an amusing aspect of John Sterling. But the fact of the matter is, to give John Sterling his due, he has been doing the games for 30 years, since 1989, and it turns out he hasn't missed a game. So he has done 5,060 Yankee games in a row, and people are noting it now because, in fact, now he is taking a break at the age of 81. He's taking a week off. After 5,000 games in a row in 30 years because his doctors advise that he's slowing down, et cetera, et cetera. But it's kind of an amazing accomplishment to do it for 30 years in a row. And he talks about before that he was working in Atlanta. He was doing basketball games and baseball games. So he was doing work this way all the time. He did that for 5 years in a row and never missed a day, et cetera. He's got a great voice. People always say this about Sterling. He has a deep baritone voice. And you wouldn't know he's 81 years old, but and he's kind of insufferable. If you're not a Yankee fan, it's a lot to listen to. but
that is some kind of attendance record.
Yeah, I mean, 30 years had not missing a game.
Who wouldn't love to have an employee like that?
Well, the thing is, and they do so much traveling. I mean, he's 81 years old, and he's going to a different city 3 times a week, and it's kind of crazy that he's able to do that. But he is slowing down, and he's Susan Waldman, the woman who works with him. They're in the booth. There aren't, as you might expect, too many women doing baseball games, but she's the other play-by-play person. She's only 72, so she is the younger person in the team.
You told me she was a caller.
No. She wasn't a caller. She did call-in shows.
Oh, she did call-in shows.
On WFAN. And before that...
I thought you meant that she just called up one day and say, how about me?
There are a couple people like that who work at FAN. She's not one of them. Okay. Her background was, she was, as I think I mentioned, on Broadway as sort of a supporting type actor for years. So she was a little bit of a theater background going way back. But in any event, she's relatively knowledgeable, and she certainly is devoted to John, and they're a unique type of team. I will say this, that it's not hard to get a Yankee fan to say, look, the Yankees are so much better than the Mets. The only thing that the Mets have that's better than the Yankees is their broadcasting team. I've heard that many times. But in any event, give Sterling his due. He's entitled to a week off.
I know you were upset that you missed the Mets broadcast.
Well, it was
the other night. We were watching the local, kind of
we were
rivalry, the Mets and the Phillies.
Yeah, I should explain. We were watching a feed from Philadelphia, and when we get a game here in the Philadelphia area, I'm blacked out of the New York broadcast, which means that I can't see the great Met announcers, which in this case were not only Ron Darling and Keith Hernandez, but Jerry Seinfeld, because it was Jerry Seinfeld night.
It was Jerry Seinfeld night, and they were giving out Jerry Seinfeld bobblehead
right.
dolls.
So instead of listening to them, which looked pretty funny, I'm listening to John Kruk for the Phillies, and they're actually showing the Mets booth, and these guys are laughing hysterically with Seinfeld.
And we didn't get to hear
We didn't get to hear a word of it. Yeah. So that was rough.
Yeah, that was rough.
Yeah.
So, all right, another way to keep cool is to go to a museum. And at the Frick, there's an interesting exhibition in New York, the Frick Collection, called Tiepolo in Milan, the Lost Frescoes of Palazzo Arquinto. And these are a group of what we might call preliminary sketches or modello that were done in preparation for doing the actual frescoes, painting on the ceilings of this palazzo back in the 1730s in Milan. Now, the original frescoes, which had, various interesting stories, like the love between Perseus and Andromeda, etc., and an interesting sort of what you might call allegorical painting of triumph of arts and sciences. That sounds like a schnorrer, really. But
a snorer, not
a snorer. What's a schnorrer?
Snorer is a person who's not a good person. It's Yiddish.
Okay, well, this is, this is maybe a very good thing, but a little boring.
Right.
But anyway, the point is that these frescoes were in a building that was bombed by Allied bombers in Milan, destroyed. But we have these original modelli, original sketches, purchased by Mr. Frick, actually. And so we can see what they perhaps looked like and imagine them. But it brings back to sort of the forefront this idea of artistic heritage being destroyed, and which is happening in many countries now, especially in the Middle East, as a result of these conflicts. And really, Milan was pretty well destroyed, and the notable exception was, of course, The Last Supper,
right,
by Leonardo, and that managed to survive. But Milan is not the most beautiful city because of how heavily.
No, it's an industrial city now. I mean,
the Allies bombed it and destroyed much of its architectural history. But anyway, this would be fun things to see at the Frick. Okay, and moving right along.
Yes, this is your
a little bit of a visual. Okay, my apologies.
Only a little bit.
All right, but I'm kind of thumbing through the New York Times today, and I notice a big ad for an auction house. Okay. Is it an auction house or is it just a gallery? Anyway, it's M.S. Rao Antiques, and they very often have a large, colorful ad of a painting or a sculpture, some fine, fabulous thing in the first section of the Times that they are offering for sale. And the title of this, and you look at it, you can't figure out what it is, but it says, Seat of Love, the Siège d'Amour, designed for the king, incredible rarity, tantalizing history. Prominent Parisian cabinet maker Louis Sobrier designed the Siège d'Amour, or Seat of Love, for Edward VII, Prince of Wales, later King of England, in about 1890. A notorious playboy, Edward had an example of this extraordinary chair delivered to his favorite bordello in Paris for his personal use. And it facilitated a variety of interesting, shall we say...
I'm not helping you out. You're on your own.
Uses. He was including being able to amuse himself with two ladies simultaneously. So, I mean, it's quite the elegant late 19th century rarity. Maybe someone wants to invest.
Yeah,
I have to say,
it looks a little bit like an upright sled or something.
I went on the website, MS Rao Antiques.
Great.
Not very helpful. I thought maybe they'd have some diagrams or something.
I'm sure there are websites that do have diagrams.
Can you imagine cataloging that? Quite risque.
I think LL Beans probably will have something.
But very
next
historical.
Week.
Apparently, there are three known today.
Yeah.
The original that the king had, and then there's one in the Museum of Sex in Prague.
Where it belongs.
We missed that museum.
We did.
We saw some museums
We'll go to Prague again some other time. That's as close as we're getting to that chair. Although there's a Museum of Sex in New York. Who knows? Maybe that will come to pass.
Maybe they should buy this so they could, measure up to the Museum of Sex in Prague.
Measure up. Okay, so the final story is this. This is to take a little bit of a turn.
Sex was all over this week, right?
Yeah.
There was that guy who's selling sex toys at Walmart.
At Walmart, yes.
And he wants to be the Kleenex of sex toys.
Yeah, that's a poor image, but yeah. So this has nothing to do with sex. Sorry. Turns out that 80 years ago, on July 4th, what we had was Lou Gehrig's farewell speech. So I never know when I'm talking about an older baseball player or a legend, if everyone knows or nobody knows. And this is the problem with having.
I think
what do we
more
think?
people know about Lou Gehrig than a lot of your other famous guys.
Okay.
A lot of other people that you think are household names
Or not.
and are not. Lou Gehrig is, unfortunately, sadly, to some extent because of Lou Gehrig disease.
Well, okay.
We don't call it that anymore. But,
no, it's ALS.
But and when I imagine Lou Gehrig, I always think of
the movie.
The movie,
The Pride of the Yankees. So let me explain. Starring Gary Cooper. So
I really envision Gary Cooper.
All right, so that's good. That actually, to my mind, is the perfectly fine frame of reference. But just one line: Lou Gehrig was a great baseball player. He was second only to Ruth as a hitter. He also established the record for most games played in a row that was later broken by Cal Ripken. But he was considered an indomitable, totally physically imposing player. He was called the Iron something, or I can't even remember anymore. But he was an Iron Man, and he was a totally superstar. And then he, as you mentioned, contracted ALS, which is a disease that was little known toward the end of his career.
We don't know if he contracted it. He was diagnosed with it.
Yeah, I don't know what the difference is. You'll tell me later. But the fact of the matter is that so what happened was he went from this incredibly imposing figure that represented the height of physical accomplishment in the United States at the time that baseball was at its zenith to someone who was losing his physical abilities very quickly, and before you know it, he could barely stand. And they hastily organized a farewell day for Lou Gehrig at Yankee Stadium. That was depicted, as you mentioned, very famously in the movie called The Pride of the Yankees, in which Gary Cooper played Lou Gehrig. And as they, so Lou Gehrig is remembered through that movie. And sometimes you bridle at that. You say, gee, this is kind of cheap. It's Hollywood. It's not real life. But that movie became so closely identified with Lou Gehrig because Gary Cooper, and the Times describes this well, it's not because Gary Cooper looked like Gehrig, which he did. It's not because he was athletic like Gehrig, which he was not. But it was, the Times says, because Cooper knew so well how to play men of quiet dignity. And that's exactly right. And that's why that movie really resonated. It resonated so much that movie was made in 1942 that as recently as a few years ago, in old-timers games at Yankee Stadium, that's a big day at Yankee Stadium because they have a lot of old-timers on it, big names. When the last people who would appear would be Teresa Wright, who would come in as a golf cart. She's the actress who played Gary Cooper, Lou Gehrig's wife in the movie. She was received in Yankee Stadium as if she were Mrs. Lou Gehrig. She might as well have been the same thing. It was that crazy. Uh-huh. And the movie centers around the great speech that Lou Gehrig gave at the ceremony. And the Times writes a very nice article explaining the ceremony. And it's really something. I won't go into great detail, but the mayor was there, Fiorello LaGuardia, a fellow named Sid Mercer, who's the announcer. Apparently, the announcer we were talking about a moment ago didn't go back quite that far. So he was doing the game, and he's emceeing the ceremony, and of course Gehrig's there, and he's very frail, and Gehrig had some notes with him. He decided not to take them with him. And Sid Mercer actually says to the crowd, I shall not ask Gehrig to speak. I do not believe that I should, because Gehrig is weeping. Mm-hmm. And the crowd is chanting Gehrig's name. And Gehrig comes up to the microphone reluctantly and says, and here's the interesting thing, they only have 2 lines from the speech. They don't know exactly what he said, but the lines they have are this. He says, for the past 2 weeks, you've been reading about a bad break. Today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth. That's the speech. And that's the speech Gary Cooper gives in the movie. That's what makes the movie such a memorable classic movie. And they don't have anything else from the speech, except apparently the Times reported that at the end of the game, at the end of the ceremony, Gehrig's in the locker room with the friendly reporters, with his teammates, and he actually said to them, did my speech sound silly? They said it was okay.
All right.
So that's it. That's all we have this week. And we'll see you next week.
Yeah, keep cool.
Keep cool.
This is Tamsen Granger.
And Dan Abuhoff.
So Tamsen and Dan read the paper. See you around.
Yep.